Hello family, welcome back to Jimmy Stories where we share thrilling stories. Please subscribe and leave a like for us, it will mean the world to us. Also share this video to your friends and loved ones and turn on post notifications so you don't miss future videos from us. Thank you as you do so. Now sit back and relax as we dive in briefly into the story. The night air was sharp and cold, wrapping Charles like a reluctant cloak as he stepped out of the lavish club. The sound of laughter and music from the inside was now muffled, leaving him in silence. Charles adjusted his coat, tired of the shallow conversations and forced smiles that filled the club's halls. His mind wandered as he walked to his car, yearning for something real, something meaningful. Just as he reached for his keys, a figure caught his eye. Slumped against a brick wall under the dim glow of a streetlight was a young woman. Her head lolled to the side, and her disheveled hair covered most of her face. She clutched a half-empty bottle in her hand, her body sagging as if the weight of the world had drained her energy. Charles paused, debating whether to intervene. The street was quiet, almost eerily so. Should I just leave her here? Someone else might help, he thought, but his conscience nagged at him. He approached cautiously, his footsteps echoing on the pavement. "Excuse me, miss," he called out gently. She didn't respond. He leaned closer, shaking her shoulder lightly. Her eyes fluttered open briefly before closing again. "Can you tell me where you live?" he asked, his voice firmer now. She mumbled something incoherent, her words dissolving into the night air. Charles sighed. Leaving her here wasn't an option, not with the cold and the potential dangers of the city. "All right," he muttered under his breath, bracing himself. He carefully lifted her into his arms, surprised by how light she felt. As he walked to his car, he couldn't shake the feeling that this decision might complicate his night more than he anticipated. Charles carried the woman into his home, his arms aching slightly by the time he reached the door. He fumbled with his keys, trying to keep her steady. The house was dark, except for a faint glow from the kitchen. His mother was likely asleep upstairs, and he needed to ensure she stayed unaware of this unexpected guest. He gently placed the woman on the couch in the living room, her head resting against the armrest. She stirred slightly, murmuring inaudibly. Charles retrieved a blanket from a nearby closet and draped it over her. For a moment, he stood there, staring at her. "Who are you?" he whispered to himself, intrigued by the stranger who had unknowingly stumbled into his life. She looked peaceful now, her face devoid of the earlier tension he had seen. Realizing he couldn't do much else, he turned off the living room lights, leaving a small lamp on. He headed upstairs to his room, his heart pounding slightly as he passed his mother's door. The last thing he needed was a lecture about bringing a stranger home. In the silence of his room, Charles lay on his bed, staring at the ceiling. He couldn't shake the feeling that tonight was more than just a chance encounter. Sleep came reluctantly as questions swirled in his mind. The next morning, Charles woke up to the faint sound of movement downstairs. His heart skipped a beat as he remembered the events of the previous night. She's awake, he thought, quickly getting out of bed. He descended the stairs cautiously, unsure of what to expect. As he reached the living room, he froze. The woman was standing in the middle of the room, her blanket discarded on the couch. She looked disoriented but alert. Her gaze snapped to him, and her eyes widened. "Who are you? Where am I?" she demanded, her voice laced with panic. "Relax," Charles said, raising his hands in a calming gesture. "You were drunk last night. I found you outside a club and brought you here to keep you safe." Her eyes darted around the room before landing on her clothes. "Wait, did you?" she started, her voice trembling. Charles quickly shook his head. No, I didn't touch you. I just put you on the couch and covered you with a blanket. That's all." She crossed her arms, glaring at him. "Why should I believe you?" Charles sighed, running a hand through his hair. "I get it. This situation looks bad, but I promise you, I didn't do anything inappropriate. If you want, I can call someone to come pick you up." She seemed to relax slightly, but remained wary. "What's your name?" she asked. "Charles," he replied. And yours? Leah, she muttered, still eyeing him suspiciously. Charles offered a small smile. Leah, I'll make you some coffee. You look like you could use it. Reluctantly, she nodded, sitting back on the couch. Charles busied himself in the kitchen, brewing coffee and preparing a light breakfast. Leah's presence loomed in his mind as he tried to figure out what to say to ease the tension. He carried the tray to the living room, setting it on the table in front of her. Here. Coffee, toast, and some eggs, he said, sitting on a nearby chair. Leah stared at the food before glancing at him. You didn't have to do all this, she said softly, her tone less confrontational now. I figured you'd need something in your stomach, Charles replied. You drank quite a bit last night. Leah sipped her coffee, her eyes scanning the room. This is your house? Yeah. I live here with my mom, he said. She doesn't know about you, by the way. So, if you hear a door creak, just be quiet. Leah chuckled faintly, the sound surprising both of them. It was the first time she had shown a hint of humor since waking up. Thanks, she said eventually. For not leaving me out there. Anything could have happened. Charles nodded. I couldn't just walk away. You looked like you needed help. A silence settled between them, comfortable yet filled with unspoken questions. As they finished breakfast, Leah glanced at the clock on the wall. I should probably get going, she said, standing up. Charles nodded. Do you need me to call a cab? No, I'll manage, she replied. But as she moved toward the door, she paused. Charles, I owe you. If there's anything I can do to repay you, let me know. He smiled, shaking his head. You don't owe me anything. Just take care of yourself, okay? Leah hesitated, her hand hovering over the doorknob. Maybe I'll see you around, she said softly, before stepping outside. Charles watched her leave, the door closing behind her with a quiet thud. He didn't know why, but he felt a strange pull, as if this brief encounter wasn't the end of their story. He sighed, running a hand through his hair. What a night, he muttered to himself. Little did he know, this was only the beginning of a chain of events that would alter both their lives forever.